Hi guys, are you ready for kind of a different type of tutorial a little bit of how to use this blue? It's a long nifty knitter, and I will try to look up how many pegs and I'll put that as a note as well, to use to make cupcakes. To use kind of as play with your daughter or son that wants to pretend they're baking and you want to make them a cupcake. And this technique we're going to do doesn't require you to stuff the cupcake at all like you would with other projects. And you just basically need two different yarns. I'm doing a white for the frosting part and a brown for the bottom of the part. You want to make it like a chocolate cupcake. And it's not going to take too long. It may look, you're going to look at me crazy like, why are we using this loom? But again, when you see the technique, you're going to laugh and be like, that is pretty simple to do and I can handle it. So I wanted to I did this a couple years ago and I totally forgot to do a video, and I was like, I so have to do one because this would be so cute for kids, especially little girls that like having their tea parties, or little boys that like to have tea parties and bake and all that stuff. So again, you want two kind of yarn. Now what's good about what we're going to do, we don't necessarily need two of each. Typically with the nifty knitter, because of the gauge, I tell you to use, if you're using a worsted weight yarn of 4, to use 2 strands. But because of what we're going to do, you won't need to. You can get away with 1. Now this is actually a little bulkier, this one, than this one. I mean, it might be more like a 5 or just, I can't even remember the name of the brand. I want to say it's like a Lion brand one. But again, these are just what I had left over for this project. And I want to make my daughter one. So we're going to start with the frosting, which means we're going to start with the white. So go ahead and get your first color ready and we'll start the process. Now we're just going to keep this kind of simple. Now what I actually wanted to do was a scalloped cast on. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my crochet hook. And this is a cast on that I kind of showed you recently. And I just think it'd be really cool for this as well. We're going to use it for the frosting part, so that we have a cuter edge when it comes off. So you don't necessarily need this tool right now, so just put it off to the side. Your regular hook, you need a crochet hook, and you need your yarn. You're gonna do your slip knot. And again, you're gonna place it on your, crochet hook instead of on the loom. Now you're gonna start, with me, because I'm right-handed, if I try to start this way, it's kind of awkward. So I'm gonna start the opposite end that I normally start with. And again, you're just going to do the scallop cast on. Now I'll do it for a little bit, and then you'll see a link to it in this video, so if you need a little more instruction on it. So we're going to place it on the outside. We're not using this peg. We're only going to be using it as a flat panel. We're going to bring our yarn behind the peg, and then come in front to grab it. And again, if you can hold your tail, that would be good. And you bring it through. Okay, hang on a minute. It's going to fight me because it's a little different yarn than I'm used to using. So kind of gently hold that, and you got to bring this through the loop, go behind the next one, bring it through the loop, as you can see. So we're just going behind and bringing it in front, going behind, bringing it in front. And I'm going to continue this around, and I'm only going to go to the following peg that's parallel to the one I started with. So that's all I'm going to do, is go behind. So go ahead and get to the other side, and then I'll show you the next step. And again, if you have a different flat loom, you can try this same idea for making a cupcake. I just remembered how this one had came out. So we're just kind of going around. Okay, and go around until you get to the other side, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I'm pretty much to the last peg that I want to do, and all I'm going to do is take the loop off my crochet hook and put it back on there. Again, it does not have to be perfect for what we're going to do for this cupcake, so we can just leave that alone, and make sure you push them all down. And all I'm going to do is a basic E-wrap back and forth, using it as a flat panel. Again, as you see, I did not join them around. I'm going to work it back as a flat panel and work my way back and forth for probably about 5 rows, and then we'll come back and we'll add on the second color and do the bottom part of the cupcake. So go ahead and continue on with your first color for about 5 rows, and then we'll come back and change it out. Okay, we've got our first 5 rows done, and as you can see, we got a nice pretty cast on here. And again, this is the frosting part of the cupcake. Now we need to switch over to do the actual cake part of it. And I'm going to use this brown. Again, it's thinner than the one I have on there right now, which I know some people would probably be like, well, isn't that going to be an issue? And it could, but again, this is just a sample. So I mean, you can see that we have two different widths that we're going to use. And you can do that as well. I mean, you kind of want almost like a thicker yarn for your frosting when you think of frosting on a cupcake anyway. So what we gotta do, excuse me, is we just gotta tie these two together. And you want to tie it as close as you can, just because it makes it easier. So I'm tying it, you can see, as close to the project as I can so that I can switch the colors easier. You really want a knot in there as close as you can. And again, I sometimes double knot it just because it makes me feel safer that it's going to stay on there. And then you're going to take your scissors and you're going to trim this part because you don't need the white anymore. And you can actually trim your brown a little bit while you have it there as well. And again, you can choose a different color yarn. And you're done with the white until we get done with the project. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch out the stitch. Even though this is very thin yarn and you're not going to see the different stitch that I do as well as a thicker yarn, I still would recommend doing it. I'm going to actually do a knit 1, purl 1 combination for 5 rows. And again, you want to make sure that when we start, we're doing knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and we're going to do that back and forth. You want to make sure wherever pegs you're knitting on, that they stay the ones that you knit when you come back on a flat panel. So again, just keep that in mind that you will be knitting 1, purling 1, but on your next row, you will probably be purling 1, knitting 1. You're going to be reversing it. You want to make sure that you're purling all the same pegs and knitting all the same pegs. So if that helps, go ahead and write that note down, that when you're working your way with a new color, we're going to do a knit, a purl, a knit, a purl, and you want to make sure, again, that you're knitting on all the same pegs that you knit, and you're purling on all the same pegs as you work your way for 5 rows. So go ahead and do that for 5 rows, and then come back here. Well, actually, you're going to need to do a little more rows. I forgot, the cupcake part is usually wider than the frosting part. So you may need to do like 10 rows. So we'll check in at about 5 rows, because this yarn is thinner, so I may have to use more rows. And keep that in mind. The thickness of your yarn for your frosting or for your cake will determine how many rows you may want to do, because again, it's going to be kind of, you'll be able to modify this to be a cupcake that you want. So again, I'm going to do about 5 rows, and then I'll check it and decide if I need to do more. I won't necessarily come on back on camera. I'm going to determine probably how many rows I'm going to need. I might have to do 10, I may have to do 20. It really doesn't matter. It's basically, you're going to eyeball. As you see right now, we've probably got a little bit, about an inch of the frosting, so we're probably going to want about 2 inches of the actual cake part. So I would actually say whatever yarn you're using, go until you get probably about 2 inches down from your loom, and then we'll check in from there, okay? I'll see you back here in a little bit when we get down to that far. Okay, now we're at the part I finished up what I wanted to use for the brown. Now again, this is only using the thin strand, and again, once you see the next step, you'll see why it doesn't matter as much about seeing through it. But you can choose to double up your yarn for the second half. Again, this is our frosting part, and this is our cupcake part of it. So now what we gotta do is we gotta take this off the loom so I can show you the last step, or last couple steps probably. We're gonna do the crochet bind off, and again, with the crochet bind this, we're gonna rewrap that first peg, and I'm gonna put 2 chains in between. So I'm gonna wrap it once, I'm going to rewrap it again and knit over, and then I'm going to move it over to the next peg. Okay, and then from there you're going to knit it over. You're going to rewrap that peg again like we just did in the first one, so wrap once, wrap twice, knit over. Now again, you may choose to do 1 chain in between. It all depends on the yarn you're using, how bulky it is, how many chains you want to do. And again, after we do 2, we move it over. So again, continue this process all the way around your loom, and we'll get to the end and I'll show you how to take it off completely. We are on the last few pegs that we have to do before we take this off. So remember, we were knitting over as we moved the peg over, knit a loop over, and then we knit twice on 1 peg. What's great about this cupcake idea is it does not require any stuffing, which I know may sound strange because you would think that to make a cupcake you would have to have stuffing, but this way, like I said, that I saw, that I did a couple years ago, I was thinking this would be really great because it doesn't require the stuffing to make it a cupcake. Or a mini cake if you want to call it that. And what's great too is once we roll it up and we see how big it is, you can determine how big you want the next ones to be by how many pegs you cast on. So you can use different long looms. I wanted to do the first one to show you guys in the way I did it before, was using the biggest loom. So we got one more peg to do here. Okay, so we're going to move it over. Gonna knit it over. Okay, now we need a crochet hook and our scissors. Since the yarn I'm using is kind of thin, I will use a smaller crochet hook. So all we have to do now is we're going to cut our tail about 4 or 5 inches. And we're done with that for now, for the second color. Now go ahead and take your loop off the peg, place it on your crochet hook, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop the crochet hook down so I can remove my loom. And now what we need to do is we need to bring in the tail so that it's actually locked into place. So we're going to wrap it. Oops, wrong way. It would help if I used the right side of the crochet hook. Okay, so we're going to wrap the crochet hook and then bring our straggler through. Oops, I think I just had it separate on me a little bit. Okay, and that's going to help lock it in place, and then I'm going to do another quick little knot. And if you want to, with this tail you have, you can just kind of bring it in and decide to work it in the tail, or work the tail in a little bit if you want. And then once you get it down to the way you want, you can trim off what you don't need. Okay, so again, you're going to say that this doesn't look like a cupcake. Now comes the last step that will actually turn it into a cupcake. So we have, as you can tell, like I said, we have our frosting and our cake. Now the simplest way to make this look like that is you're going to lay it out flat. You're going to pick one side, and I'm actually picking the side that I started with because I've got this tail that I want to hide anyway. Excuse me. And we're going to roll it. So you're going to hide the tail in there, and you're just going to roll it as tight as you can, fixing it as you go because it may decide to curl up on you here. You're rolling it up, and you want to keep an eye on the bottom because you want this to be flat because that's the flat side of the cupcake. And again, keep an eye on that. Now again, what yarns you use will change out the shape of the cupcake a little bit. So again, it's something that you can easily modify. And what we have is our cupcake. Now again, if you wanted to, you could double up the yarn down here and that would give you more thickness. But again, because we did the scallop cast on and we wrapped it around, it gives our frosting a nice little swirl effect. Now again, you can double up this side. It all depends on how you want it to look. Let me back up here. Okay. So it's our little cupcake and we need to tie it off. But there's a couple things you could do before you tie it off. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you, if you wanted to, before you wrap this up, with your starting one, you could put, like if you unwrap this, you have a couple things you could do before you turn it into a cupcake. You can make a little like pom-pom and attach it right at the center so that when you roll this up, it'll look like you have a little cherry on top. So you could put a pom-pom there. You can also, if you want sprinkles on your cupcake, go ahead and tie little pieces of like yarn string at various spots randomly. Roll it up and then trim them and it'll make it look like you have sprinkles on your cupcake. But again, depending on the yarns you use, and if you decide to double up, like I said, I didn't double up. I could easily double up and it would change the thickness of the bottom of the cupcake. So again, it's something that you could easily modify, and I thought it was a great project that kids could do as well because it doesn't require a lot of changing up of stitches. It's a simple process, and they could even be in charge of the rolling up for you. Like I said, however tight, if you decide to roll it up loose, you can do that. Again, keep an eye on the bottom of the cupcake because you don't want that sticking out if you can help it. And just keep an eye on where it's going because you want it to lay kind of flat. So I'm kind of tucking it in and I'm rolling it up as I go. I call it my cupcake. And like I said, I love using the white and I'm using a chunkier thing for the frosting. I think it's kind of cute. And because we changed the stitches on the bottom, here, I got a little out of whack there. And because we did a knit purl, I'm not sure how well you can see it here because of the shadow, it will kind of create that ridge. So all you would need to do is double it up. So once you get it where you're like, wait a minute, okay, I've got my cupcake done, I've done the sparkles, you're checking the bottom to get it as level as you can. As you can see, I want it level so that it will stand on its own, like that. So how are you going to tie this off? Now there's two options. If you know how to sew, first make sure you're lining it up so that where your color ends, you know, it's right as close to it, so it's not like down here, up there. You want it as lined up as you can. Now I'm going to do it because I don't know where my sewing purple knitting tool that sometimes you get with the looms are. I'm actually just going to tie this close. Again, this is for play for a kid, so it's not something that, you know, you could probably definitely think of different ways to do this, of how you want to tie it off. So I'm going to grab a couple pieces of string of that color, and I want at least one of my white that I had earlier, so I'm going to cut a piece of white. Okay, and then I want to grab my crochet hook, which I don't know what I just did with it. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to look at the end, and we're just going to use our crochet hook, and again, we're lining this up. So the first one I kind of want to do is my white. I want to tie off this so that it's already in place. So we're going to take the crochet hook, we're just putting it like this on our hands, nothing fancy. We're going to go into the project, and we're going to grab it so that we can grab one of it and bring one side through. Again, keeping an eye on your cupcake as you do it, and then just simply tie it so that it will be tied together. And then when you have these stragglers, what you can do is you can work the stragglers up the project. So I'm going to turn this a little bit, and I want to bring it over here so I can create another knot in it, and I'm basically just trying to attach it to the first part of the project, so, you know, attach it so that it will be more secure. So I want one more up here, so I'm going to use my crochet hook. I'm going to come up here into the project a little more. I'm going to grab my yarn that I want to be able to tie, because I just want to make sure that the white is tied closed. And you can give it an extra knot when you're done. Now you're going to say, well, you have this and it's going to look ugly. Well, what you can do then is you can weave it into the project in the same color that it's at. And kind of weave it in there a little bit. And you can even do it down towards the edge if you want. And once you get it where you want it more, oh, come here, not fighting me, then you can trim that side so you don't have to see it anymore. And you can do the same on this side. You can crochet, you know, using your crochet hook, kind of hide it into the project a little bit. And then trim it. So that's the top part, and again, that's our cupcake, that's our frosting. So now we gotta do the bottom part. We don't have that tied together. So you're gonna want to tuck any parts in, you want to check and make sure you got it kind of level. And again, we're gonna do the same process with our crochet hook that we did for the white part, tucking in anything we don't want to see, digging ourselves into the project so we can hide it in as much as we can. Okay, let's try that again because it got a little tangled here. You just want one part to come on the other side. Okay, you want to see, like that actually did not attach to the next part, so we want to come down here and make sure it's attached into there. Okay, again, keeping an eye on your flat. Again, if you're using 2 strands, it's going to help a lot. So I'll come back in a second and show you it all finished. Okay, again, here is our finished cupcake. I mean, it's got some minor issues there that you can fix, but again, it's just a simple little project for kids that like to play bakery or anything like that, that you can make up a bunch of these and they could use it, obviously, to play with, and it's, you know, not too hard. It's not going to hurt them or anything like that. If they drop it, it's not going to make a loud noise. But again, remember that you can add in some things before you wind it up to give it a little more detail. With the sprinkles idea, you can even do it once it's wrapped up, but I would suggest doing the strawberry, or like if you want to do a pretend strawberry or pretend cherry or whatever on top, or gumdrop, whatever you see on cupcakes, I would attach that before you start rolling, and then that way it would already be centered in the middle. But again, I thought this was really cute as a little cupcakes, and you can make a bunch of these up with different colored frostings. And I love the idea of a chunkier yarn for the frosting than the bottom, because that way it, to me, reminds me more of like a cake, because you got the texture, and it's a pretty good size. You can see it against my hand. It looks like a regular cupcake. And I'm sure if you really wanted to get creative, you could probably use a small loom and make yourself an actual cupcake wrapper to put it in. But again, have fun with this, and I hope your kids like it.